everyone, it's AJ, and today it's Monday. You know what that means. It's Manga Monday. Hey! I didn't want to be too cheery because given what we're going to discuss, I felt like it was a wee bit of bad taste. But anyway, I want a bit more of a solemn intro. Especially when we're talking about the most depressing novel that I have within my manga collection. We're finally talking about No Longer Human. Yeah. Remember I said at the beginning of the month that the one at the end of the month was going to relate to the depression that happened at the beginning of Manga Monday Mayhem? Yeah. If you're a Bungo fan, you know why this is important and why this is relevant. And frankly, I don't know why I decided to torture myself to even talk about this, but hey ho, here we go. We're here. Now obviously, if you're still here after my warnings, there is still a chance for you to click off because this is heavy going. It really is. And I am going to try my best to try not traumatize you too much with this video. So it may come across as vague. However, you may be wondering why I would want to talk about something that is very, very disturbing and very fucked up. And despite what happens within this story, the story itself is actually interesting. It's a very intriguing story despite all of the harshness of it, let's just say. Just because it does deal with some rather dark and mature themes does not mean that it can't be an interesting story. Now, granted, with that being said, you definitely have to take it very seriously. And when I say if you are not in a very positive mental state, do not touch this, do not go near it, do not even bother picking it up. And I don't mean that to be in a cruel way. It's just, this can lead you to a dark path. And when I say it took me months to read it because I already have a prior knowledge of what the contents of this is like, I technically did not read this for about 4 months after I picked it up. I picked up about a year ago, and as twisted as it sounds, I didn't read this until Christmas time last year. And the only reason why that was I already had it in my head that I could not read it when I was very happy or when I was very sad. Any positive emotion or any negative emotion. Because I felt like to get the best opportunity to enjoy it, I would have to have the most neutral mood. And that is literally my biggest top tip. Because if you're very happy, this is just going to ruin your mood. And if you're already in a dark place, nope, definitely not. Neutral, it doesn't bother you as much. It still does freak you out and may make you feel a little bit down. However, it won't drastically affect you as it could. So that is literally my biggest top tips for even trying to think about reading this. So, let's begin. Obviously, if you're a Bungo fan, you will be well aware of this story, No Longer Human by Osamu Dazai. And given obviously in the show, Dazai's ability is named after No Longer Human. So, technically, this is the manga version, this is Junji Ito's adaptation of it. And if you are well aware of Junji Ito, you know why this is horrifying to read. He isn't known for being one of the best horror mangatas for no reason. Literally, his artwork is terrifying, but beautiful, but holy fuck. And I'm not gonna lie, it's actually partially the reason why I don't actually own any Junji Ito, bar this, because frankly his art style does freak me out. But being the stupid bingo person that I am, I had to get it. So a bit of background knowledge if you don't know this. No Longer Human is considered somewhat a suicide note of the actual author Osamu Dazai, because not long after this was published, he succeeded in his attempts to unalive himself. Because many of the things that happen within No Longer Human reflect on his own life. So, that being said, you can already gather about how dark this story is going to get. Junji Ito also kind of, I don't want to say twisted the story, but like he tweaked it a little bit, in which Osamu Dazai actually appears in this manga version, where he meets his fictional character that basically personifies himself, or is believed to be himself. And basically, No Longer Human is written because of the character in No Longer Human. So, the story follows Yozo Oba, who is essentially our Dazai in this story. And we go through his journey from a kid to an adult, through all of his abuse, and, well, basically how he carries himself and adapts to life around him. And it's not well, to say the least. And given at a young age where he's abused by his family, sexually abused by the workers that surround his family, and then having to, as a child, basically put on a happy face, so basically perfects the myth of masking, and basically present himself as the class clown, always happy, making jokes. Doesn't always work in his favour when people can see right through the act. And the first person that manages to do so doesn't end up in a good place, let's just say that. Basically, the main character bullies this boy who can see right through him to say that he's faking it, he's clowning around just to get the support of his peers. And through that, Oba basically bullies the kid to the point where he embarrasses him that much that he ends up taking his own life. So as a child, he basically pushed someone to end their own life, and then is haunted for the rest of his life of this image of this boy that he basically pushed to the edge. And it doesn't end there. Now, it depends on your outlook on life when you're reading this. And from my personal perspective, you should not trust the main character. And frankly, you should not like the main character. Yes, you could maybe sympathise, given the fact that what he's went through. However, doesn't mean he could get away with what he ends up doing. So, but I know there's other people that feel differently. And in ways, that's what's quite good about the story. It's like, your own perspective, like, makes you see the character slightly differently. In saying that, even Oba doesn't even think that he is a good person. He literally sees himself as a monster. So it depends if you literally take that on and be like, well, he also sees how much of a terrible person he is. And just to drive that point forward, it's basically on the cover, you see these lovely little faces. And this is basically how Oba sees people and like how he sees himself and whatnot. And when you take off the sleeve, because this is a sleeve, it literally just shows you like how horrified he sees himself and whatnot. Like, this is literally him and his loved one, which is like later on, like one of his lovers like later on. And this is literally how he sees them, how they see them. And just the same on the back, this is another one of his drawings. Shit. Like, because he paints, like, because basically the main character is a manga artist, like, in adult life. He tries to become a manga artist, and he paints and whatnot, and this is, like, one of the pieces that he also creates. Like, he doesn't see the beauty in life, basically. And you probably would have noticed I said one of his lovers. Basically, the man goes through so many women. Not that that's a bad thing. However, almost with nearly every woman that he focuses on or, like, commits to, basically leads to their death one way or another. First, it starts off with his cousins, where basically he ends up staying with his cousins because they're, like, dropping out of school, and he basically plays with there's two of them, so he basically plays with them and toying with their emotions and whatnot, to the point where they fight over him and one kills the other. Yeah, and this is the beginning of the trend of women dying in his life. Death is a major theme of this story, whether it's himself, like Oba, trying to end it all, or just the influence of what he does to those around him. Basically, death follows him wherever he goes. And he has a lot of blood on his hands, let's just say. Even though he may not have personally done the deed, his actions basically resulted in it. And it doesn't matter if he's joining an underground Marxist group where the woman that he was hooking up with almost dies, and then despite that would go around behind her back to hook up with another lassie that has a child, which would then, after him gaining enough money, because he got cut off from his family, so he has, like, no money, so after he's scrounged enough money off of this poor woman and child, he then runs away to the other lover that he has in a different town to then use them to benefit himself. And the cycle never ends, because once she's finished with, or once he's done with what he wants, he finds somebody else, which includes a woman that works in a diner that he ends up getting cozy with, and them basically agreeing to end it all on the beach, to which he fails and she succeeds, which then places him as a holder of he was the one that actually killed her and not the fact that they tried to die together. And it would not be the only time that this would happen. To think that what happened to the waitress would be enough, given everything else that happened up until this point, would be really underestimating how much more damage this novel can do. Especially when it comes to women. My god. So, after that, basically fleeing away from all the antics that happened with that waitress, he ends up with a innocent little tobacco seller. And through their courtship, let's just say, over time, because he actually somewhat committed to her for a while until something else happened, but we'll get there, Oba continues his streak of essentially ruining women's life, taking an innocent little tobacco seller and turning her into a highly paranoid person. Basically, the lassie that was so full of life, had high hopes for the future, ended up going insane due to being so paranoid about what Oba was doing, that she then ended up ending it all because she couldn't handle what he was doing. Because Oba did not stay faithful and continued his antics of just using women just to get whatever would essentially make him happy or just make his life better. Because whilst he was with that lovely lassie that was so devoted to him and would do anything for him, he then ended up getting into drugs and was getting a fix of basically the pharmacist in town. To which then they started an affair, and due to them two being together was what led to the little tobacco lassie just deciding to end it all. And then through that, not long afterwards, the pharmacist then ended up in flames. Literally. Like, shop burnt down to the ground and she was burnt to a crisp. So the blood never stops to stain Oba's hands, let's just say. And through that incident, then he ends up in basically a psychotic prison ward, best way to kind of describe it. And this is where the kind of tweaks kind of come in, because here Oba meets Dazai. Dazai is a patient within the same block as him, and Oba tells him some story about why he's here, and Dazai goes, "Oh, well, I'm a writer. Can I write about your story?" And that is how No Longer Human now exists within itself. It basically becomes very meta at that moment. And in that moment you find out that on the other side of in the women's area is his cousin that he got pregnant all those years ago, and outside is their child that just hangs out there and looks identical to the very first kid he ended up driving crazy and driving it to the end. And through that, like, somewhat reunion sandwichy, they end up just coming together because, well, that's his kids, so there's not much else for him. We then finally reach the climax of the story, let's just say, and it's 12 years later and we're getting a perspective from Dazai. And basically, Dazai within the story makes a promise to Oba saying, like, once I've completed this book, I'll come and give you the first copy. So he's finally completed No Longer Human and goes to seek out Oba. And what turns out is Oba has been somewhat used and abused, basically, given how he has treated women his whole life. Basically, the women of his child just replicated it back to him. And we see that given that when Dazai's bringing his lover with him just so that he could see his friend, and when she returns home, she literally beats the living shit out of him because of the beautiful woman outside, because obviously, given Oba's history with forever cheating on whoever with another woman because one was never enough, Dazai literally witnesses his friend just get abused, like, and that is literally how Oba spends the rest of his days. And Dazai leaves rather heartbroken, and it ends with Dazai and his lover ending it all. The first few pages of the manga are Dazai himself with his lover actually committing the final act. And those pages are in colour. It's the few coloured pages that are in it, from the beginning to the end. So the only coloured pages that are in the novel centre around when it's just Dazai on his own with his lover, which puts in a very interesting perspective because it somewhat presents it as modern day and the rest of it is in the past. Given that it's perceived to be as autobiographical, it makes creative sense which then just adds a kind of extra layer to this whole story. What I personally find really interesting about the story is it's all about like the mental psyche of like the main character and like why he does the things that he does. Like I said earlier, like he already views himself as a monster, yet he continues to do like monstrous things. So despite how he views the world, why doesn't he change it? And what like drives this character to do what he did? Like why do all those things to like women? Like why would he do all the things he did to himself, like the drug abuse and everything like that, alcohol abuse? Like why do all that but still be aware but choose to ignore it? So there's a little breakdown about what no longer humans like. It's a long read, let's just say. It's quite thick, so this took me about 3 hours in one sitting. And I personally did that because I knew if I stopped, I probably would never pick it up again. So if you're going to do the same, make sure if you need to take a little break, take the little break. Because I did do that. I literally had to put it down at one point just to mentally clear my head about what I just witnessed. Because Junji Ito's art style will literally ingrain it into your head. Because no matter how traumatizing like the words can be in the normal novelization, Junji Ito's artwork can like drive it home. So please tread carefully if you're going to indulge in this media, whether it's just even the normal novel or this version or any other adaptation, because there's a couple. There's other mangakas that have done No Longer Human. I just personally picked up Junji Ito's because Junji Ito is obviously more well known, and I didn't know about the other one until I got this one. So please tread carefully, and I will apologise if you feel like I haven't went into too much, because I will not lie, it's quite hard to talk about this and try and not be depressing. Obviously you can tell that the mood's completely different from all my usual other videos. Obviously tried not to make snarky jokes. I've tried to be as neutral as possible because I feel like it would be rather distasteful if I tried to treat it as I did other Manga Mondays, or just manga in general, given the subject matters that are involved. And if you've made it this far, wow, I appreciate it. I hope that I've not depressed you too much. This is probably the last time I'll probably talk about something as bad as this. Will it stop me from reading such stories? No. I already plan on rereading this at some point, because it is interesting. However, like I said, I need the right mood to read it in. And I will admit I kind of hate myself for actually suggesting that I was going to do this. And I actually almost didn't record this episode because I didn't really want to talk about it, because not in the neutral mood to talk about it. I will be honest. And I really just had to make it, because I'd basically talked about it this whole month, spent this whole month planned out that I was going to do it, and I didn't want to disappoint yous, let's just say. And I'll take myself if I'd just copped out at the very last week. the only hope is that I know that you can actually see over there. I have a lovely new pile of manga because the manga ban's over. And I have some happy shit in there. And it'll be fun to get to talk about that. But anyway, this is the end of Manga Monday Mayhem. And I will never be discussing anything this depressing ever again. Because frankly, I miss being very happy and cheerful and talking about fun things. And I know this comes from somebody that makes bingo videos. But bingo doesn't come anywhere near as fucked up as this. So, final warning. Please be careful. And please look after your mental health and whatnot. And we shall be back next week, technically, with the new chapter of Bingo, where there'll be tears, but at least we can laugh and cry over it, whereas we can't do that here. And we'll see you in the future for other Manga Mondays, where they're going to be a lot happier and I can make jokes and I can try and make it more entertaining. So, yeah. So anyway, until next time, I'm Eiji, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.